Good morning. My name is Marjorie Wilder, and I'm a member of the law firm of Pullman and Comley. I have the great pleasure of interviewing today, February 25th, 2004, Commissioner Rhoda Loeb. This is part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession. The project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation. Commissioner Loeb, could you give your full name for purposes of recording in on our tape, and also your date of birth and place of birth?
Sure. I'm Rhoda Loeb. I was born in Branford, Connecticut, March 30th, 1921. And, you know, before we begin, may I say how proud I am to be associated with James Cooper's program, because I got to know Jim Cooper a long time ago when I was a young lawyer under 30 years of age, coming in from Branford to New Haven to attend Bar Association meetings. At that time, most of the time, I might be the only woman in the room, and all the other lawyers were networking, and I was just a young gal coming in from Branford. But it was Jim Cooper who would always come over and say hello and words of greeting and express a warmth to me that I have never forgotten. And it is so nice to think that he now has extended that caring to endow this fellowship.
It's wonderful that you and that we in the Connecticut Bar Foundation have an interviewee who has known Mr. Cooper. So really thrilled that you mentioned that. You mentioned that you came into New Haven from Branford. You were born in Branford as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your parents and siblings?
My grandmother came to Branford around 1910 as an immigrant. She had arrived from Russia, a widow with 5 children, in 1902, and she opened a market on Columbus Avenue in New Haven. I have never understood how she could come from Russia, not knowing the language, 5 children, no money, and open up a market and immediately go to work. And unfortunately, by the time I thought this was remarkable, everyone was gone that I could ask. And they just took it for granted that that's what she had done. She lived at that time, Columbus Avenue was a mixture of Irish, Polish, Russian, many of the immigrant families all melded in this area, and the McAveny family, who went on to do great candy distributors. And Justine McAveny was married, or is still married, to Dr. Frechette. And every now and again when I meet, we go back and talk about the family history, that the McAvenys and the Leshine family all came from Columbus Avenue. Well, fast forward, this grandmother, Leshine, in 1910, read an advertisement in the New Haven Register that a news store in Branford was for sale. She goes on the trolley to Branford, which was almost an hour's ride at that time, meets with the Clancy family, buys the news store, moves her family to Branford. My father was working in the news store, and he used to go on horseback around town delivering telephone messages. They had the first and one of the 1 or 2 telephones in Branford, and he had a horse, and he would deliver the papers and the telephone messages. He fast forward, got married, brought my mother, who came from New Haven, whose name was Jenny Evans, from the Evans family. That Jack Evans is a great member of the foundation, Connecticut, and became a leader of the Connecticut Bar Association. And they lived in Branford, and until sometime in the 20s, they moved to East Haven because their children could go to the New Haven schools either after graduated from East Haven High School, and the family then moved back to Branford. From East Haven High School, I went on and went to the University of Michigan.
It was very unusual, wasn't it not, for Jewish families to move to Branford in the 1910 period, in the early 1900s?
It was, and we went to Russia to Fastov. This is sort of not had anything to do, but I was always curious as to why this grandmother did that. And we went to where they lived in Fastov, and indeed they lived on a small dirt street about 15 miles outside of Fastov. And they had done and lived the same way. They lived next door to Russian priests who helped them leave where the children, the boys, were going to be conscripted into the army. And so this was not the usual shtetl story, and I don't know why. They observed the Jewish religion, but they, even in Russia, did not live among Jewish people. And we did find the dirt street. I did have the records enough to do that. I don't know why.
Particularly interesting for me because I think I've told you that my grandfather was born in Branford as well. So it's a very small world. You indicated that you went to the University of Michigan. How did you decide to go to that particular college?
Just by chance. I was thumbing through catalogs. We had almost no guidance at that time in high school, and I didn't know anything about taking college boards. In East Haven High School, no one took college boards, so I had to find a school that did not require college boards. They had a journalism department. My father, by that time, had started the Branford Review, and so he owned the newspaper, which I worked on in summers, and I thought I would have a career in journalism, and it was far away. I wanted an adventure. So those 3 points made me apply, and that's where I went.
Did you ever work after college in the field of journalism?
I never worked after college. I worked during college on summer vacation. We always had to do something productive, and so that I worked in all ends of the newspaper, both writing and advertising. And but after college, I never worked again. I went to law school and studied.
And you went to law school directly from the University of Michigan?
Directly from the University of Michigan.
What made you decide to choose law school as your next step?
Well, again, journalism played a factor in that. I was on the Michigan Daily, which was an outstanding college newspaper, members of the Associated Press. I did not receive a senior appointment, so at the end of my junior year, I was crestfallen. And I thought, well, I'm going to do something that will give me more background, because I looked around and most of the people who received senior appointments were people I thought of the world. They had traveled, they had done many, many things, and they knew a lot more, I thought, than I did. And so it was part of my insecurity that I decided I should bolster myself up and learn something that other women wouldn't know necessarily. And so I set my eyes on law school.
Did you intend to practice law when you went to law school? Or did
No,
you
I never thought of practicing law. I just thought about a career in journalism. And so I had a wonderful time in law school because I never worried about grades. I didn't think in terms of getting a job in the law. And I just enjoyed people, and I loved the courses. And I loved law school. I thought it was fascinating.
Why did you choose Yale Law School from the University of Michigan?
Well, I had gone down to Columbia and had a very good interview and given indications that I might be accepted. And I wrote my father that, and he wrote back and said, I've talked to people in the community, and I have found out on my own that Yale Law School is a better law school. So you must apply to Yale. He was paying the tuition, so I unfortunately put an application into Yale. And when I was accepted, I was rather disappointed because I really wanted to go to Columbia and to New York City.
Did you live at home when you went
At
to
that time, I lived at home, and it worked out to be just fine because I really spent all my time at the law school, and living was not a very big part of that. We really stayed at the law school until 11 or 12 o'clock every night and ate with the other people in the law school, and I was very happy with the arrangement. And I found Yale Law School a very challenging and stimulating place.
Were there other women in your class?
We had about 6 or 7 women in the class, and they came also from a variety of backgrounds, and were really, we had a good time.
Do you remember how many students in your class at law school approximately?
There were probably, Yale generally took about 120 at that time in a class. This was a little less because it was during the war, so there were fewer. And it made for a very cohesive situation. People were stuck together and were very supportive to one another. And I found it much less competitive than the University of Michigan.
That's interesting. I'm not sure that's Yale Law School's reputation today.
Well, in the sense of being competitive among each other or between each other, there was much more support, and I think the competitiveness was, it is their reputation today. I have to say that Yale does not flunk people out as Harvard used to do, and once you were at Yale Law School, there was a security about being there, and that's what I mean about the competitiveness. No one looked at each other and thought, well, one of us won't be here because they are going to average us out. And in the University of Michigan, there were a great many failures, and they counted on that.
Were you treated differently because you were a woman at law school, do you think?
I don't think so, Marge. I think there's always, of course, you're treated differently in many respects. If you're young and like being a woman and like going out on dates, of course, people look at you a little differently than if you're a man in the same category, young and like going out on dates. The gender is always there. But I think Yale Law School was a fortunate choice because they had always had women in their classes. As I studied the history of women in Yale Law School, they have had women going back to the last century in their classes. So the faculty was always used to having, and while they never spoke about a quota, as I looked back over the classes, you would see anywhere from 3 to 10 women in a class.
Did you have any women professors at the law school at that time?
I don't think there were any women professors, but I remember Kate Tillotson, the wife of John Tillotson, was very friendly with Dean Gulliver at the law school and helped him and assisted him in preparing the materials for his estates class. And as I recall, I think she gave 1 or 2 lectures to us. And I was very aware of her name because Professor Gulliver would often speak about his associate, Kate Tilson, and the assistance she gave him. Very proudly spoke of her.
Are there any specific events that you could tell us about that you remember best from law school?
I don't think any events. There were some funny stories. I remember being terrified of Underhill Moore, who gave courses, but everyone else was too, and Wesley Sturgis, who gave a course in credits, and we covered 39 pages of a textbook which he had written, which had some 900 pages in it. And then after we finished those 39 pages, he gave us an open book exam for 4 hours and said we could bring anything in that we wanted. And he had that kind of a stimulating mind that he talked during those 4 hours. And fast forward to one of my experiences, I'll go back to it later, with this course in credits that I took from Wesley Sturgis when I got to New York City.
Did you specialize in any field while you were at law school, or was it just general legal background, legal education?
I did. I became interested in labor law and took as much labor law as was offered, and including 4 hours of honors work in labor law my last semester with Fred Rodell, and also did some work with Harry Shulman in labor law.
Did Fred Rodell and Harry Shulman, were they mentors of sorts for you, or did they have a special role in your educational experience?
I got to know them because of my interest in the labor law, and they were very, very helpful to me and took an interest in me, yes. And I loved them for all their stimulation and intellect. Fred Rodell is really responsible for my becoming a lawyer rather than a journalist. Those were choice days coming out of Yale Law School. We were somewhat in demand down in New York City. And so Fred said to me, you can go to the training school for Time, Life, and Fortune if you choose. He had connections and did writing on the side for those publications. And or you can go down to Wall Street, but I think you should go to Wall Street, and then if you don't like it, you can still go back to Time, Life, and Fortune. Harry Shulman, who was probably the greatest teacher I've ever had, anywhere, any place, and just said about the same thing to me. Go have the experience, and then as a lawyer, and then see, and then do your writing. So between the two of them, I formulated that decision and went to Wall Street, but I stayed there for over 4 years.
How did you choose the law firm you were going to?
Well, we received a list of firms to interview in New York, and we went to the various firms. I had first gone to another firm of some prominence and had interviewed 3 times there very successfully, and was asked to meet the last senior partner on a given day, and successfully was concluding that interview when he suddenly asked me the derivation of my name. And I looked him right in the eye and said, "I'm Jewish." knowing that's what he was after, and he immediately looked me back in the eye and said, "We don't hire Jews here." I left. I went back to the law school and told them my experience. I was still in law school. We were in the last part of our last year. And the associate dean of the law school said to me, "Rhoda, we don't want our students to have those experiences. That is exceedingly unpleasant, and we will take that firm off our list for Jewish students." I have really concluded that rather than being a woman, the problem down in Wall Street, New York City at that time, was being Jewish or maybe another minority, and definitely another minority. They didn't even think of blacks. Rather than gender, you could overcome gender. You could not overcome the anti-Semitism and the racial feelings and discrimination that was there. As I look back now, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Of course, I will always qualify and say, coming in from Yale Law School opened the doors for gender. It really did. We were also given lists, and these firms wanted to interview us. And I suspect that they gave me lists that they knew women would be attracted to or acceptable.
Excuse me, in your interviews, were you asked questions about, do you intend to marry? Do you intend to have children? How long do you intend to stay?
I suppose so, but I don't remember, honestly. So it was not anything, I suppose it was on their minds. But on the other hand, Wall Street was a very competitive, fast-track place in those days. And everyone was hired, incidentally, at the same salary, $2,100 annual. And they were seeking out good students who could contribute to their research and possibly become junior and senior partners, but probably maybe not even 10% of those hired would. So I don't think they were as interested in looking for the 5, 10, 20-year employee as we think of that today. I'm not sure, incidentally, today that they look for long-term commitments either, but I don't know about that.
And you graduated in 1944, is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the influence of the war in your ability to obtain employment in New York, if any?
Oh, I think it was a big help. Oh, no question. They needed us. And so there was a demand. There were demand for all good law students, and they were seeking us.
And what was the law firm you finally
I went
chose
to a firm called Spence, Hotchkiss, Parker, and Duryea, and I didn't know much about it. They did some labor law, and that attracted me to that firm. And I lucked out because at that firm was one of the great women of all time, Zoya Menchikoff, who was at that time a senior associate in the firm, not even a partner. She went on to be the dean of the Chicago Law School, University of Chicago, and then on to teach at Harvard Law School. So, and was the first woman, I believe, to teach at Harvard Law School.
Were there any women partners at the time you joined your firm?
No, but she afterwards became a partner.
What kind of law did you practice in your law firm at that time?
I went into the labor law department and started to work with a junior partner. And within the first 6 months, we had some cases in Washington to which I was going to be asked to go down with this partner, and I was ecstatic. I thought I was going to Europe. It was such an exciting adventure to be going to Washington on a case. I was, at that time, I guess, still 23 years old, so I was really pretty green about things. As we were on the train going down, he said he started to talk about plans for the evening, and it became clear to me that he thought I was going to spend the evening and maybe the night with him. And I disallowed that idea and said that I had other plans for the evening. We got through the hearings and the case and court, but on the train on the way back, I could tell that he was not very happy with me as a person. And during the next week, I was going by the corridor and Soya Menchikoff, this woman attorney I've just spoken about, said, "Well, how was Washington, Rhoda?" And I said, "Washington was fine, but you probably won't see me here after the next partners meeting." And she said, "What do you mean?" So, "Come on in and close the door." So I went in and I told her all about Andre's proposals to me and what I had done about it. And she started to beam. She said, "Oh, wonderful. You're not the first one." I found out afterwards that they knew about his propensity. No one had said a word to me. I was left on my own. Wow. I didn't think it was very nice, but at any rate, I luckily got through it all right. But what happened was she had a huge dislike for this partner and went to the senior partner of the firm, Mr. Spence, and told him about my experience. The result of that was that I'm going to take a sip of water. You can see I'm still angry about it. I was taken away from him, and because they realized that he was going to give my work a downplay, just to get rid of me, and before he could do that, I was taken away from him, put into a general pool, and left in the library. So, okay. One night I'm in the library trying to recoup all my losses and feeling very down, when a junior partner was walking around. He and I are the only two people in this large library, and I'm trying to become a spot on the wall and get lost. And he is cursing to himself as he's reading some cases. Finally, he comes to me and he said, "Look, I don't care what you're working on. I want you to research this point for me and bring it to me in the morning." It was then late at night. Well, I stayed until about 3 in the morning or later even. I thought I had found a case in point. I was so tired that I couldn't believe my luck, and I thought I must be hallucinating. I went back and got an hour or two sleep. In the morning, I walked into his office and said, "I think," and he looked up at me and said, "I don't give a good goddamn what you think. Tell me, did you find an answer?" And I said, yes. the answer is, and I gave it to him. So he said to me, all right, you come to court with me. We're going to court at 10 o'clock. I'm going to put that point in the brief. Court turned out we were going to the appellate court in New York City. In the taxi cab on the way up, I turned to him and I said, do I wear a hat in court? Marge, I had never been in court before, ever. In today's world, you can't imagine going through law school and not ever going in even to the city court in New Haven. I had been sworn in the court in New Haven. It was the only time I'd ever been in that courthouse. But law school was all intellectual. We had no clinical courses at all, except for moot court, which I did with Molly Toro. And so Wall Street was quite formal in those days. You wore a hat and gloves. And I had a hat on, and I didn't know whether you wore a hat in court or you didn't. It was a dumb, dumb question. And afterwards, he always teased me about how I unnerved him. He said to me, I guess you keep it on. We get into the appellate division, which is a very, very formal courtroom, very formal. And we're sitting down in front, and all of a sudden I feel a tap on my shoulder, and a guard hails me out of the courtroom. I didn't even have time to tell the partner where I was going. And we get outside, and he said, in the corridor, and he said to me, you can't wear a hat in court. And also, where you're sitting is only for attorneys. I said to him, I'll take my hat off, but I am an attorney. He said, I don't believe it. I said, I am an attorney, and if you don't let me go, I'm going to lose my job. So I rushed in, I just broke his grasp. He actually, literally, was holding on to me. And I rushed back, and I got a dirty look from the partner, and he got up to argue the case. He argued the case, which I didn't understand all the points. It was a Corn Exchange Bank case, and we were general counsel for this big bank in New York City. And it was on a credits point. And lo and behold, the judge, the appellate judge, asked him a question on this point, which I had researched and was in the brief. And he answered it the way I had told him. And we had a rather successful argument and day, and we got back. But when the decision came down, it was in his favor, and the judge cited the point that I had researched. Well, that was just total luck. I had had 39 pages of Wesley Sturgis' credit course, and that was that open book exam. And so I went back and told Wesley Sturgis about it, and he poo-hooed the whole thing and said, well, you know. But it was his voice that came to me. Who's the creditor? Who's the surety? What's the case about? That I could hear as I was in that library, trembling with the fear that I wouldn't know enough to be able to research this point. So it was really a matter of luck in hitting a case in point, and that is luck. It may be when the understanding is training, but finding a case sometimes is luck.
You know, the appellate division was clearly, in New York, was clearly not used to having women attorneys
Not
there.
at all.
And And at that time, you were probably just a first year or
I was 23 years old.
So there would be no thought of your arguing that particular point in the court?
Oh, no, no, not at that point. No, that was, I think the junior partner was dignified by arguing the point. I mean, it was a big deal to him. I didn't know it at the time, but this was an important case. And what had happened the night before was, as he was going through, as good litigation and appellate lawyers will do, they review their own cases and reread them the night before trial. And what he was cursing about in the library was dissatisfaction with whoever had written some of the research papers that he was looking at. And he was unhappy with that and had latched on to this person that just was sitting there. I was the only one sitting in the library.
Now, you mentioned that the first time you were in the New Haven or Connecticut courthouse was when you were sworn in as an attorney in New Haven. So I take it you took the Connecticut bar?
I immediately after graduation, I took the Connecticut bar and then went right down to New York. I was already practicing law in New York when I came back to be sworn in Connecticut.
Now, did you take the New York bar later on? Or
I had to wait 6 months for residency, and I took the New York bar.
There was no multi-state at that time, was there?
No motion, no.
So each state had separate exams?
And they were tough exams.
Were they all essay questions?
There were some true and false. New York had half the exam was true and false. I found the essay questions easier, having been trained at Yale Law School. I really did, than the true and false, because I didn't see things black and white as much as gray.
Good lawyers that are trained not to see things black and white. How about the Connecticut bar? Was that all essay, do you recall?
I don't recall, but I think most of it was essays. I remember deciding before I took the bar in Connecticut to discard the question that they had one question at that time on Connecticut jurisprudence and procedure. And we had never studied that in law school. And we were advised that we could discard that. In other words, if you did well enough on the rest of your essays, don't worry about spending your time boning up on Connecticut procedure, which would have taken me a lot of time because we had none. At that time, it was a national and international law school, and they didn't pay any attention or expect people to practice in Connecticut.
You did have bar review courses then, as they do now?
Absolutely.
There were?
Absolutely. But even in the bar review, the Connecticut, I didn't, I guess I must have taken the bar review in Connecticut. But yes, I did take it. And I spent the time on the other subjects, not on Connecticut procedure. And then just attempted to do something with it. But I remember that very clearly, that we kind of figured out how to approach the exam.
How many years did you spend on Wall Street in the Spence law firm?
4 years, just over 4 years. I just remembered the name of the Connecticut bar course, Harriman's course on Connecticut. I just came back to me. Yeah.
Did you take that course after you graduated from law school?
Yes.
And then they'd give the bar exam in the summer?
In the summer.
Interesting. I was sworn in also in New Haven courthouse. I'm not sure what they do now.
Oh, I think it's still in the
Still
courthouse
there.
in New Haven.
Yes. Well, when you were at the law firm, did you join in any organizations?
I was active. The firm policy was that you should be active in the City Bar Association of New York City. And I was, they provided the membership for us. And one of the senior partners in the firm, Mr. Duryea, called me in one day and said, I would like to have you join the Women's City Club of New York City. My wife is a member and she will be proposing you. Well, I thought, oh, come on. I didn't want to waste my time doing that, but I better not say no. I thought that was a lot of nonsense. Well, I found out this was a very select group, and among other members was Eleanor Roosevelt. And it was the kind of organization which in those days you would find only in major cities, of successful women who were all out doing things. So it was a pretty special time if you were in a place like New York City, because women were accepted pretty much, not the way they are today, but it was all possible. And if you had the right introductions, I have to say that had a lot to do with it, because it made it all so much easier. I think it was very difficult to come in off the street as a woman and do anything. But it may be true today, too. I don't know that times have changed.
Did you meet Eleanor Roosevelt?
I did meet Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a phenomenal woman. The other thing that Mr. Duryea did for me, and again, this is really introductions in Yale Law School. I only say this because it was possible to do things if you had the right credentials, and it was sort of like what the world was like for special people. It wasn't for everyone. And as a Jewish woman, I had gotten into this waspy world really by being fortunate enough to have gone to Yale Law School, choosing a firm that was really very, and that was luck, that looked fondly upon women because they had such outstanding women as Sawyer Menchikoff there. And Mr. Spence had no feelings of anti-Semitism at all. He was just one of the, nor did many of the other partners, at least in any of the work that was, or the kind of pleasant experiences. For Mr. Duryea called me in and said to me one day, I want you to handle a special client of mine who's also a personal friend. She will be your client, but you will let me know what's going on. And it was Mrs. Vanderbilt Webb, who owned a shop on Madison Avenue and ran it. I realize now it was a crafts fair, and she must have been importing all these wonderful crafts done by indigenous people in other countries and furthering their products and introducing. I did what small legal work she had to do, but I considered it just an extra burden almost at the time, and I was so unappreciative. And as I look back on it now, he was so nice to me, and doing that special extra of, so whether it was because I was from Yale Law School and because I was a woman, I think it was both. And Mr. Duryea lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, and his best friend was Prescott Bush, who was the grandfather of the present president.
Did you happen to have an opportunity to meet Prescott Bush?
I did. Many, many years later, fast forward, he was coming through Branford on his first campaign for the Senate, and I was a member of a group that was invited to meet with him. And during the course of that political meeting, I mentioned that I knew Sam Duryea. Well, he was the one who said, "That's my best friend." And he said, "I want to talk to you about that later," because there were people waiting in line to meet him. He came up to me later and he said, "Some of us are going to dinner at the Summit House. Would you join us?" And I said I could work that into my schedule. And when we got to the Summit House, he looked around the crowd and he saw me and he called me over and he said, "Sit next to me at dinner because I want to talk to you."
That's fun.
Well, the other Branford people were just sort of, "Where's she coming from?" And so that recognition and acquaintanceship with him went on for all the time he was in the Senate. I would write to him, and he always called me the little judge, because at that time I was a judge in the town court of Branford. And don't ask me how I got appointed to that, because that, I really don't remember whether that was done by a governor or by or by parts of the town. I really don't remember. It must have been a government appointment, but a governor's appointment. But again, I don't have any recollection of just how that came apart. I know it was a political decision, and so it must have been done. And then when the town courts went out and the unified court system came in, which I was working on in the Bar Association at that time, so we all were happy about that. But he would always write to me, and I still have some letters from Prescott Butch which said, he called me the little judge.
I'd love to hear more about your experience as a judge in the town court. How did you decide to leave the law firm and move back to Connecticut?
Oh, in New York City?
Yes.
I was working very, very hard. It was, it's not any different than as it is today. I mean, today they get a lot more money, but you work day and night, and I never made an appointment with someone to have dinner that I didn't say, "Where will you be at 6 o'clock so I can call?" And most nights I worked until the early hours of the morning. And I didn't have much of a life. I wasn't having a good time socially, and I was getting older and I really wanted other things in life. And I thought, I don't want to, at age 50, just be a junior partner in this firm, which they hadn't even thought of asking me to be.
Right.
I mean, but I suddenly decided I really didn't even want that, because it was a fast track, been there, done that. I think I better leave here.
Had the thought of going into journalism left your head at
That
that point?
had left my head. I was caught up in the law. I liked it. I guess I'm maybe a little bit more competitive than I think, but I liked what I was doing, and I announced to my family that I was coming back to Branford. No one wanted to give me a job. Now I hit the gender coming back to Branford 4 years later.
In what way?
Oh, that's that little LaShine girl who wants to be a lawyer. They had no interest in the fact that I had been in New York City practicing on Wall Street. No interest in having another lawyer in Branford. I'll never know whether it was just another lawyer or the fact that I was a woman. They just didn't make any room for me.
When you were in New York, did you find that you were given different type of work because you were a woman?
Not at all. No.
Did you join any of the feminist organizations that were prevalent in the late middle 40s?
I didn't. There was a women's bar association. I didn't join that. I had no reason to join it. They were really. I always felt that if you were in a career of any kind, whether it was journalism or whether it was law or medicine, that you had to go with the regular track and you had to handle it as it was. And I found no discrimination in the City Bar Association in New York, which was the bar association which seemed to be the most effective at that time. I wasn't fighting anything. I was just working very hard.
Yes.
And, you know, when you're in a group where everyone else is working and where the standards are set high, and as you achieve that, the bar rises, you just keep on going.
Did you find that there were some dinner clubs or places that you couldn't go because you were a woman?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the worst situations we had in New York in the firm was the clubs were all men's eating clubs. And in our building at 40 Wall Street was the Wall Street Club, and to which the firm had a membership, except the women couldn't belong. They had a women's dining room. So if any woman was present, they had to go to what was called the women's dining room. That meant if I was invited to join with a group of either partners or clients, they had to use the women's dining room, which they really didn't like to do. So it was with great effort that I was included. And the first time I was included, I was absolutely ecstatic. I thought, well, I had never seen the club before either. So, and there were clients, and I had worked on some of their case. And there was a round of drinks ordered, and I was asked what I would like, and I said, nothing, thank you. And the various clients would ask me to have a martini or a Manhattan or sherry, and I kept saying, no, thank you. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I got hailed into the partner's office. This is that same litigation partner. I'm still working with him. And he says to me, next time order a drink at dinner, whether you drink or not, I don't care. I said, what did I do? He said, the purpose of the lunch is not to focus on you. It's to focus on the clients and the work. Remember that. And I was dismissed. And that kind of training was important. Was it gender? He would have said the same thing to a man. He was just a tough guy. He swore a lot when he was in the library and in his office. When he was with clients, he was on stage, and it was all work. It was all about work and the client. So another day, we were going to court. I again was accompanying him, and he said to me, he looked at me and he said, why don't you try putting your hair up? Maybe it would make you look older and better. Older was better, you see. So I diligently made an appointment, had my hair put up. I come in the next couple of days, and he looked at it and he said, it's not any better, put it down.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about your experiences when you move back to Connecticut. I think maybe this might be a good time for a short break,
Oh,
and then
great.
we'll come back. Hello again. We're continuing our interview with Commissioner Rhoda Loeb, and we were just getting to the point where Rhoda moved back to Connecticut and was having some difficulty, I think, finding employment. Where did you finally land a job when you moved back to Branford?
I never did find employment. I was unemployable in Branford. No one wanted me. So finally, I found a lawyer who had his offices were divided up, and his entrance had a partition, and if he didn't have clients waiting there, I could use that for $25 a month. So I took the space for $25 a month, and I could use his telephone. I didn't have any clients anyhow. So I set up shop. And that's when I just, by patience and be willing to handle collections. I remember the first client who came in wanted a mechanic's lien. I didn't know what a mechanic's lien was. He did. He just wanted me to fill out the form. So I did some mumble jumble and said I would work on it and have it for him in the afternoon. He looked at me a little unhappily, and he went out. I took out Black's Law Dictionary to look up mechanic's lien. Other than knowing there was such a thing, I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. So that was my first case, and I didn't even know what to charge him for it. So,
Did they have standard fee schedule at that time for different types of?
not that I was
law?
privy
Okay.
to. I don't think so. I think we had a lawyer by the name of T. Holmes Bracken who practiced in Branford at the time. From about 6 in the morning to 8 in the morning in his Branford office, and then went into New Haven and practiced all day there, then came back at 5:30 and practiced until 8 or 8:30 in Branford. He was a fabulous, achieving lawyer, and he had the cream of the practice both in Branford and a good deal in New Haven. Holmes didn't share anything, but he was a great model to watch in the way he practiced law. He charged so little that it was unbelievable. I mean, most things were all under $100, and probably 5 or 10 or 15 for a will. And he was also a legend in his own time.
How did you get more clients after that first one came in the
Just
door?
perseverance. You just stay in the same spot. My family was well known in Branford. Women friends would say, I'd like to come to you, but I feel more acquainted or feel more comfortable was the word, with a man. Lovely. I don't know whether that's a gender question, that in reverse, but I had a lot of that. And even from social friends. And those friends today have daughters who are lawyers, and they've forgotten they ever said it, but I haven't.
No.
It was very hard. If I wasn't subsidized by my family, I never would have been able to do it. I just, I'll tell you a secret I haven't thought of in a long time. I had to do advertising in the Branford Review because my father said I should be productive and make some money if I was being subsidized. So on Tuesdays, I had to go to New Haven. And I said, Dad, I can't solicit advertising as a lawyer. He said, you don't have to solicit. You just go and pick up the advertising copy of the firms that are under contract. All you have to do is go in and pick up the weekly advertisement. All right, that was agreed. J. Johnson was one of those firms. That was a men's clothing company. Perhaps you remember it in New Haven.
I do. Wasn't it near Yale?
It was near Yale. It was on, it had men's and boys' clothing. And I went in there one day, and I knew Jimmy Johnson, who owned it. And so he was being very patronizing and saying, well, how is your practice coming? Maybe we could give you some collection accounts. And now, mind you, this is after that appellate division, all that fast track in New York City. So, I mean, I said, I swallowed hard and I said, thank you. He said, go upstairs and see Johnny Loeb in our credit department. He's head of it. And tell him I said to give you some collection accounts. Well, I walked out. I really was angry. And I would have walked out of the store with the ad for the Branford Review, except he would have seen that I didn't go upstairs. It was visible if I walked out. So I went upstairs. I went in to see this Mr. Loeb, who I thought was just as patronizing as his associate boss. And I said, I'm supposed to ask you for some collection accounts. Well, he said, I don't know if we have any to give you right now, but perhaps sometime I could take you to a credit meeting and you could meet other people who have collection accounts. Well, I thought, you are something. You're pretty attractive, but you're still a son of a gun. And I'll drop dead before I'll take any of your collection accounts. This I said to myself. I walked out. About a month later, I received a call from him inviting me to this meeting of the creditors that took place, monthly meeting. Against my better judgment, I said yes, but I was angry. So I didn't drive my car. I took a bus into New Haven. We went to the credit meeting, and when it came time to pay for it, I took out my pocketbook. He said, no, I'm taking you to this. And then at 10:30, I looked at my watch and I said, I have to go home now and get the bus. He said, I'm taking you home. And that was the man I married. So, again, it was looking for accounts and doing the Branford Review advertising. It just grew, Marge. After a while, I just was around so much, they felt sorry for me. They would begin to give me some town jobs. I eventually became the sewer counsel for the town. I became town council. I went through all those things. They didn't pay a lot at that time. I remember becoming sewer counsel, and Bob Zampano, who went on to become the federal judge, was the sewer counsel over in East Haven. So I called him one day and said, maybe he could give me some help about what to do. And I went over to see him, and I said, all those contracts, and went on to all the problems. We were just the first phase of sewers. And he leaned back in his chair and he said, oh, Rhoda, just bulldoze your way through. Don't worry about a damn thing. Well, again, words that I have never forgotten. I always think of the Zampano bulldozing your way through.
Did you become active in local Branford politics?
I did. At the very beginning, I became a Republican because all these lawyers who were Democrats would have nothing to do with me because my family was Republican. And if your mother and father were Republican, don't tell me you're a Democrat. So we joined the Young Republicans, and that's how I became the town judge. I guess probably a lot of that must have come through politics now that I think about it. You know, some of it comes back slowly.
The town, I never heard of this before, the town judge, what does that mean?
Well, that was the system before. That was the local courts. They all had city courts and town courts before we put through the unified court system.
Is that a full-time job?
Oh, no. It was a part-time job.
What kind of cases came to the town court?
All the traffic cases that now go into the GA. It was really the jurisdiction of the GA's courts now. And all the small, no felonies, but all the small criminal. And mostly traffic violations.
Did you stay in private practice together with some of your other appointments in Branford?
I stayed in private practice until 1965. I was married. I had 2 children. One died. I had some obstetrical problems, which again contributed to my continuity in practice, why I never stopped, because a combination of my doctor, my father, my husband all decided that I should work, and we moved my practice into my house, and I could work from there and keep my eye on my young son. I always had help because they thought that contributed to the obstetrical problem, so there was nothing for me to do, my father said, except work. And I didn't have any choice. And my husband agreed with him. So Rhoda should be a lawyer and never do any housework. And that became kind of a family joke. It was all right with me, and it gave me much time to spend with Michael and my work, and that was in my marriage. And so I, in that sense, after our daughter died, that contributed really to my focusing on work and the good parts of my life. And then in the early 60s, we decided to expand our horizons, and I wanted to move into New Haven and have a larger and more varied practice, and to leave the world of politics in a small town. And the first thing I did when we went to New Haven was to register as a Democrat and then forget about it until many years later when I became a compensation commissioner. And we bought a townhouse on Bradley Street in New Haven, and I opened up my law office. It was large enough to have a law office there. And I did a great deal of family law, and I also did volunteer work in the juvenile court as a public defender, and they were happy to have me because I handled all the incest cases that had to do with a woman or child, female child, and so I became an expert in incest cases and family law problems where they needed to have a woman defender, public defender. I joined the Evans firm, which was Evans and Heavens, and then became Evans. Now it's Evans, Feldman, and Boyer, which is Jack Evans's firm. And at one time it was Mark Sklar's was a partner in that firm. He's now with Cummings and Lockwood. So My associates, by chance, all turned out to be successful practitioners at the bar, and it was a great influence on me. They wouldn't let me bring my juvenile court practice to their offices. They told me that I could continue that, but I had to see those people in the court.
How did you hook up with Jack Evans' firm?
I hooked up with Jack Evans's firm in a funny kind of way. I had to go in for some emergency surgery, and I knew Jack, and I called him to take over my cases while I was gone. And when I came back, they asked me to come over and be a partner. It so happened that I had a heavy load. It was the biggest load of casework I'd ever had at that particular time. And one of the cases was a major injury case, and Jack Evans settled it for the full amount of the claim, which was fantastic, and I'll tell you, better than I ever would have done. I would have been happy with 50 to 75%. It would never have occurred to me that I could get the full amount. And so, anyhow, it was a happy relationship. And I stayed there until I became a compensation commissioner.
When was that?
That was in 1979.
Now, was your son grown at that time? Was he
Oh,
grown?
yes. Mike was grown off at school. He was at Tufts by that time. I got a call one day from John Arcudi that Ella Grasso, who was then governor, was looking to appoint a woman compensation commissioner, and would I be interested? And I said, oh no, I've never had a compensation case. I don't even know what it is. Well, think about it. And then I received a call from Norman Zolot, who is counsel for the AFL-CIO. And also, both of these men had been classmates of mine at Yale Law School. Norman said, I understand that Ella Grasso wants you for compensation commissioner and that you're turning it down. And he gave me all these reasons why I should accept it. Well, the way that Ella Grasso knew me was because Molly Toro also had been a classmate of mine. Look how Yale Law School runs through all of my life. And so when I would go to Hartford to file papers or do anything, I would always go over and see Molly, who was the elections attorney for the state of Connecticut. Her office, for a good part of that time, was next to the secretary of the state's office. The secretary of the state of Connecticut at that time was Ella Grasso. Well, Molly Toro and I would run by all these silly jokes that predated our careers and went back to Yale Law School, and all the good times that we had. And we would be laughing away, and the door would open, and Ella would hear our silly laughter and come in and say, what are you guys laughing about? And want to be clued in and join us. That was the only way I knew Ella Grasso, was as a silly friend of Molly Toro's. So it turned out, I learned from Norman Zolot and John Arcudi, that a group of feminist lawyers who wanted Ella to appoint more judges and commissioners and people representing the government, that they wanted more women. And Ella Grasso was a tough lady. She had gotten there the hard way. She knew how to handle herself with a group of men and not back off. And gender to her was not a word she was familiar with. And so she didn't want to have this list of particularly used because, as these fellows said, many of the women who had given it to her had their names on the list. And for her own reason, she decided she didn't want to do it. And she had said to them, find me someone. Well, all she knew about me was through Molly and having this silly laughter, but she said, I think I want her. So these fellows felt they had to deliver, and I was on a platter, and they talked me into it. So against really my better judgment in many ways, I said I would try it. And that was how I became a compensation commissioner.
Were you the first woman compensation commissioner?
I was. But you know, being the first of anything doesn't get you very far unless they come after you and they're second and thirds and fourths. And fortunately there were. And well, I've always never felt that you fought the gender line. In many ways I agree with Ella on that. I've always also tried to go out of my way to help all the other women in the practice and in the profession, because it's important to be supportive. But I also do that for men, maybe a little more for women. But you'd have to be collegial, and you know that being a lawyer. It gets you, it's just an easier way to live. You don't have to do it for any reason. It's a nice way to live.
Now, Mr. Arcudi was chairman of the commission?
He was chairman of the commission. And
for many years,
for many years, and left a great legend. He's a legend in his own time.
Now, you became a commissioner 79, 80?
In 79, I served for 10 years. The trial bar, incidentally, of New Haven was not happy with my selection, and they gave me what is known as a hard time. And they would come in with their cases. They all knew the compensation law very well. And the trial bar of New Haven is well known for being very, very successful and able in the practice of law. And so it was interesting because they knew so much more than I did about all kinds of litigation and law. Litigation had never been a heavy field of mine, except in family law. And so they knew a lot about me. And I couldn't really pretend that I knew a lot about compensation law. So I would pick up a report and say, well, let's look at the medical report. I would get a call from Norman Zolot or John Arcudi after a few months, and they said, Rhoda, the talk around town is you think you're a doctor and not a lawyer.
How did you get your experience with all your medical terminology?
Well, a lot of my family were doctors, and I was always interested in the field of medicine and had always read about it and heard a lot of conversation about it. And in the practice of law, you do run into medical reports, and it's just been something I had done background reading on. And I felt more comfortable with it than I did with the jargon in the compensation law. As you know, workers' compensation law has its own vocabulary, and they used instead of using the regular words, they would, in temporary partial, they would say TP, and I would not be able to translate as rapidly as I should. So it took me, I would say, a good 6 months to catch on to the, and then I felt okay. I always felt comfortable in the seat because I felt secure enough about my knowledge of law in general. I did not feel secure about compensation law. And so I had to learn that on the job. We had no training. I mean, today they send you around to the various offices to observe. They send you to school, to a special compensation course. We had none of that. So John Arcudi put a lot of improvements into it. And our present commissioner, John Mastropietro, continues that.
Now, the state was divided up into different districts.
Districts.
So there were 7 or 8
Yes,
districts.
8 districts.
And you were the New Haven?
Yeah, at the time when I started, there were only 5 districts.
Okay.
And I took on from Harry Koletsky, and before Harry Koletsky was Louis Sachs. And these were all extremely capable lawyers who had become compensation commissioners. So in New Haven, there was a good legend. And Louis Sachs was the grandfather of the firm that is still in existence today.
Now, so there would have been the chief, John Arcudi, who was the head of the commission, and then 4 other commissioners. Did you have meetings together?
We had monthly meetings, and that was helpful.
How were you treated?
Oh, I was treated the same as every other commissioner. You know, I always paid, there were little things that we did coming on from New York practice. I always paid my own way when we went out to eat with other lawyers. If someone treated, then I treated back. So I always had that as you handle yourself and work as you would without any gender qualification. And anyone that made any change in that, I would just say, no, let me do it just like everyone else is doing it. So I think after you set that standard, they become comfortable with that.
I always, excuse me if I'm not being kind, but when I first started practicing before the Workers' Comp Commission, which I did for some years, found it a very closed society. When I first walked in, actually working for this town, I found that if I wasn't part of the small group of lawyers who practice, you felt out of it. And I was wondering if you felt had the same kind of feeling when you became a commissioner.
Marge, absolutely. That's what the trial bar did to me. Oh, it is a closed society, and it's also a very gossipy society. They are a close-knit group. There's something called the Trial Bar of Lawyers of Connecticut, the state of Connecticut. Now, you'll find that goes on all over the state. They're a closed group of supportive people to each other. And the Trial Bar of New Haven, many of them, I found out in later years, get to work at 5 or 6 in the morning, and they talk to each other on the telephone at that hour. They have their little social talks along with their reviewing their cases for the morning. They're very hardworking. They're very, very supportive to each other. And the names are legendary. And I had people like Hugh Keefe coming into my office, and Paul Farron, and many of the very good trial lawyers, and their standards were very high. And they expected me to understand their points of view, and if I denied them, to give it a denial with good reason. I survived.
I think you more than survived.
But it took me, as I say, a long time. A long time. And you're absolutely right, it's a very closed society. And I don't think that's as much on gender as it is what you do. Because I think people like Karen Torrey, who's a very good criminal lawyer in New Haven, and other women who do a lot of litigation have opened that up. Whether they're as comfortable the trial bar, I don't know. There may be a gender difference still there with the trial bar.
How about the lawyers that came before you? Did they Do you think they treated you differently or expected something different because you were a woman?
That presented in front of me?
Yes.
I think at the beginning they were critical. I think there's always the gender thing is there because you're a woman. I think claimants who aren't represented come in and decide, well, you might be prejudiced because you're a woman. I think your demeanor has to account for that. I think you try to be without any telltale evidence of any kind of favoritism, or it's just something that you're always aware of, that you must. Pro se clients, for instance, are really a good lesson every day.
And by pro se clients, that's probably quite common in the workers' comp division where people come
It's more common,
unrepresented.
and it puts you on alert because they pick up nuances or things that you're not even aware of and don't intend. So you have to be very careful that they know that you are representing fairly and you're listening fairly. One of the things that you learn is not to ask a counsel who's waiting how the new baby is, because a pro se client will think that you know this person and you're favoring him. And when you're dealing with the same people over and over again, you know that he's expecting a baby, or maybe he called in that he couldn't break the last hearing because he was going to the hospital. So you have to be aware of that, and we all learn to do that. We all learn to do that.
Are there any particular cases or a particular case that stands out in your mind during your full-time work as a compensation commissioner?
I don't think so. We have the difficult cases usually are the ones with difficult claimants who are mentally unstable, but you move on. It's always today, and you've got a new array of cases in front of you, and you remember category of cases, and I would say unstable clients, or that you worry about, that want surgery when they don't need surgery.
And you were a full-time commissioner for how long?
I was a full-time for 10 years, and then I decided to retire.
And when you say retire, did you retire from working in the law?
I had already retired from working in the law because you can't do both. And so I decided to retire as a full-time compensation commissioner and not go back to private practice, and decided that for the first time in my life I would be just a housewife and enjoy leisure. I did that for 3 weeks. I took bridge lessons. I joined the garden club. When the women from the bridge lessons started to call me up to play bridge at their homes and practice, I decided I can't do this. And having been brought up with this work ethic, that I just found myself not fulfilled. So I called John Arcudi, who said, come on back, and come back as a what we call retired senior active. So you can choose the days that you work and go in and hear cases. And I've done that ever since.
And even after John Arcudi retired, you continued on?
I've been very fortunate. The new chairman also has Commissioner Chairman John Mastri Pietro has also encouraged me to come in, and I go into the New Haven office 2 or 3 days a week and hear cases.
Do you do both informal hearings and formal hearings?
I do mostly informal hearings. I like that better. I don't have the homework of writing the decision, the formal decisions. And I think it works well on continuity.
Throughout your long and successful career, you had a husband at home. What did he do? And
John was in the printing business and became editor of a weekly newspaper in Branford, and had an enjoyable career until he sold the newspaper and the printing business and retired to a fulfilled life of library work and research. He's a very dedicated member of the Branford Blackstone Library and is a trustee and runs a rare book sale every year and collects the books from donations throughout the year, and also will research and is a collector of candle snuffers. So he's very much interested in the arts, and there aren't enough hours in the day for him, so I'm fortunate.
He's always been supportive of you. You alluded to that before. How did he feel about you taking on this commissionership?
Fine. Anything I want to do has been, I just had the same kind of husband that I had as a father, which was very lucky. Anything you want to do, as long as you can do it, go for it.
How did your son feel about having a working mother when probably it wasn't that common?
It wasn't. I remember his nursery school or kindergarten teacher telling me when we came for Parents' Day that they had an assignment to draw their mothers during the day. And every child drew a picture of the mother in the kitchen, except my son drew a picture of his mother in front of a typewriter.
But at least you didn't have a hat on, I bet.
I didn't have a hat on.
Yes.
And then a wonderful story about Mike being important to my career was when he was about 7 years old. We always had a rule in the house that Sunday mornings was Mother and Dad's time to sleep. And so, and he could get up and do anything he wanted except don't wake us and no phone calls. Just tell people we're out. So that was catch-up time. And one Sunday morning around 8:30, he comes in and he says, Mother, there's a phone call for you. And it's the same lady who's calling, whose picture is on the front page of the paper, and her name is the same. I didn't know what he was talking about. Come to find out, there had been an airplane crash at the Tweed New Haven airport, and this woman, whose name was Jean Nair, I can still remember her name, whom I knew, was in the airplane crash. And she was injured, her husband was injured, and her son. And she called me to give me the case. And Michael, who I wasn't even sure could read at that time, or let alone the newspaper, but he emulated, I realized, his father, who every morning would sit and read the newspaper at the breakfast table and didn't talk, that Michael had come on Sunday mornings when we weren't around, was doing the same thing his father did, was go out and get the newspaper and prop it up on the table and have his milk and crackers, which was the Sunday morning breakfast, until we got up. So this has always been the most amazing. I got that case, which was by far the largest case I'd ever had. I brought it into New Haven I remember, to the firm of Al Winnick to help me because I needed much research and other people to work on the case. It was a fantastic case, a personal injury case. And so, and that was Mike, who somehow comprehended by osmosis.
This was an important phone call. That's great. Who took care of Mike when you worked?
I always had good help in the house, and in the early days, my office was in a part of the house, so I could always keep my eye on what was going on until we went to New Haven, and even then I had my office in the house until I went over to Evans and Evans' firm. So that was what I did.
Now, you lived in the townhouse in New Haven, but at some point you moved back to Branford?
Yes, in 1990 we moved back to Branford. We bought a house on the water, which my husband had admired, and so we live on Long Island Sound and happily sail away.
You mentioned when we talked before that you're doing some work in the history of the Jewish people in Branford, which fascinates me. How are you going about that?
Well, I'm learning today. They're teaching me in this cable television studio that I've just changed my whole approach. Instead of writing it down, doing the history, I have all my notes. I'm going to go back and find someone whom I have in mind to do an oral history. And I will sit here just like I'm doing this and use all my notes and get the thing done, because I really have notes stemming from people who are long dead, and I'm collecting all this history, and if I don't finish it, don't think there'll be anyone to do it after me who will understand my notes.
You know, in retrospect, you went to law school, you didn't plan on becoming a lawyer. Are you glad that you went into the legal profession as you did?
I love it.
What would you change?
I don't think I would change more. I would love to have had more children who lived. I would love that. That's about the only thing I would have changed. You know, would hope that that would have happened. But Michael is a great son and a very good sailor. So that has been very rewarding. There's not much I would change.
What's your accomplishment that you're proudest of?
Oh, no question, Michael and John, my son and my husband. I've had a good time with both. You know, it's just happenstance. John has been so supportive and his own person, so we kind of have a good time together. We don't do the same thing. The only things we have in common are a love of the water, and we love the theater. But his interests in research aren't my interests, and he likes to write, and I would just as soon do this oral history. I like to talk. So it works out. We don't tread on each other's turf.
Do you have any special advice for young women entering the legal profession?
I think you need a sense of humor. I think you need to do your work, be strong, use your intellect as much as whatever you have, use it fully, and keep a sense of ethics. I always said I couldn't remember to do anything bad because you have to lie to remember it. And if you do everything one way, and the correct legal way, then you don't have to remember what you did. because you know that you wouldn't have done it any other way. And I don't mean that kind of in a patronizing way. I just mean it's easier to live that way and to practice law that way. I mean, don't ever take an acknowledgement of someone who isn't present in front of you. I mean, it's just make that such a rule. And so when anyone asks you, did you acknowledge this? Yeah, if my signature is there, I did it.
Because I always do it.
Because I always do it. I couldn't do it any other way.
Is that advice different from what you might give a young man entering the legal profession?
Not at all.
So should a woman have any special advice?
A little more humor. A little more humor, because you gotta laugh you have to laugh when you do get a gender discrimination or any other kind of discrimination. I think that you have to remember that this too will pass, and look for the fact that make a joke about it, but you're serious, but pass it on with good, try to look at it like, well, I can't change the world in one day, but I'm going to work at it and move on to the next step.
Despite your wonderful, successful career, you said that your proudest accomplishment was being a mother and a wife.
Oh, no question.
How would that factor into your advice to new young women?
It's awfully hard. I think you just have to take day by day and take it as it comes, because I gave you a lot of reasons why I kept on working. They weren't at the time happy reasons, because I had medical problems that made me very depressed and unhappy, but you kind of had to say, well, I have to do something. I can't just wait 9 months and keep waiting 9 months. I have to go on and do something. And so I think each person, a woman, it's as long as we bear the children, but men today are taking more time off and are much more supportive around the house. And that's the other thing. My husband chose to change the diapers for Michael and participate, to the consternation of his mother, who couldn't believe it. But he was so thrilled with the child and the whole thing. So we always had fun doing that together. I think for women who have successful pregnancies, keep on going, have a large family, they have to make some choices. And today, they used to say you couldn't go back to the practice of law. I think today you can. That was another fear that people would tell you. Once you leave the law, you can never go back. We know now that's not true. It isn't true in medicine either, and they said that. So, or in accounting, or in anything, you can keep up, you can read the periodicals, you can keep up with what's going on. And so, I think women today just have to take each day as it comes in their own particular life and see how the ball bounces and what, health, money, whatever it is that comes or you need. And I don't believe you leave your children and go off and practice law unless that works for you.
Rhoda, this has been a wonderful experience, and we're so happy you could share it with us at the Connecticut Bar Foundation and hopefully to a much larger audience. Is there anything else you'd like to add that I haven't asked?
I don't think so. I began this with accolades for Jim Cooper, and I'd like to finish that with the same. Thank him for endowing the Connecticut Bar Foundation and doing the oral history of women in the legal profession. And I would like you to go back and look up the history if someone has worked on it, because there have been women who practiced law for a very long time in Connecticut. Did we touch on any of the early women like Frances Roth?
I honestly don't know, but it is, your suggestion is wonderful, and we will look into it.
Yeah, because there were people and there were women who did a great job.
Thank you so very much,
Okay.
and I'm personally honored to have been able to
Oh,
meet you
come on.
and interview you, and I truly mean that. So thank you very much.
Marge, it's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.